Her daughter-in-law called her a waitress, loud enough for donors to hear. Judith Marlowe, widow, benefactor, and mother, didn't correct her. Blake, her only son, smiled like it was true, and let the insult hang. By month's end, Charlotte's company would be bankrupt, her image audited, her empire dissolved. Judith had poured decades into legacy. Now she'd spend a season dismantling illusion, and when they finally looked up from their branding decks, they'd find her already gone, carving her name into something they'd never inherit. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Judith adjusted the cloth napkin in her lap for the third time, folding its perfect corners into crisp symmetry while the chandelier's reflection trembled in her wine. The Gala sparkled in all the ways Charlotte liked: crystal centerpieces, chrome-backed chairs, jazz quartet, the kind of event meant to impress, not connect. Across the table, Charlotte leaned toward a woman with lip-glossed laughter and whispered, not quite quietly enough, "She looks like a retired waitress." The words sliced through the hum of small talk and string music, aimed like a dart coated in gloss and arrogance. Judith sat 3 seats down, silent. She did not flinch. She did not blink. She let the insult hang in the air like cheap perfume and sipped from the flute she had, in fact, paid for. Her navy dress was quiet, structured, hemmed to the ankle, with a neckline as high as her tolerance was low. It didn't shimmer under the lights like Charlotte's rose gold sheath. It didn't try. Judith hadn't come here to compete. But now she knew she had arrived for a different reason. Blake laughed at something a guest said, oblivious or pretending to be. His bow tie was crooked. He'd tied it himself, stubbornly, just like when he was 8 and insisted on wearing one to school picture day. Judith remembered. Charlotte, on the other hand, had perfected every angle of the evening, right down to excluding Judith from the planning, but not from the bill. Judith slowly placed her glass on the linen-covered table. The stem made a soft tap. No one noticed. She smoothed the front of her dress and stood. Still no eyes turned. Not even Blake's. She walked away like a tide pulling back before a storm, measured, calm, and inevitable. In the parking lot, the night air was cooler than expected, brushing her skin like glass chilled just out of reach. Judith stood still for a moment beneath a halo of amber light, then pulled her phone from her evening clutch. She scrolled past Blake's last "Thanks for the support, Mom" text, sent weeks ago with no follow-up, and tapped the contact labeled Sheila, Estate. "Judith," came the lawyer's voice on the third ring, clipped but warm. "I'd like to revise the guest list to my legacy," Judith said without preamble, her voice calm, even elegant. There was a short silence on the other end. Then, "Understood. Do you want to start with exclusions or successors?" Judith looked back at the glowing windows of the venue. Inside, Charlotte was likely posing for photos with donors who didn't know the linens had been triple invoiced. The image burned behind Judith's eyes like a match just struck. "Let's begin with exclusions," she said, and slid into her car without looking back. As she started the ignition, the radio flared to life with a trumpet solo, bright and theatrical. She turned it down. No need for brass. That night at home, Judith opened the drawer beneath her mother's antique vanity, the one she hadn't touched since Blake's wedding. She pulled out a bound document, her living trust, neatly tabbed with blue and yellow post-its. She placed it on her kitchen table, then fetched a fresh legal pad and black ink pen. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only earn after decades of noise. Judith didn't turn on music. She wanted to hear the scratch of her pen as it crossed out names with precision. Charlotte's, Blake's, tentatively. Every letter she wrote sounded like a decision. The elevator opened with a soft chime, and Judith stepped into the marble foyer of Klein and Pratt, her navy wool coat folded neatly over one arm. The receptionist smiled, offered tea, but Judith simply nodded and kept walking. Her heels clicked across the stone floor, not hurried, not hesitant, just inevitable. Sheila Klein rose as Judith entered the glass-walled conference room. "You're early," the attorney said, brushing a strand of silver hair behind one ear. Judith placed her leather folder on the table. "Punctuality is the only luxury that doesn't depreciate." Sheila's eyes crinkled. still sharp. "I've had practice," Judith said. She eased into the chair, unclipping the pen that had been riding the folder's spine like a sword. They began with formalities, then moved into deeper terrain, one clause at a time. "I want to transfer Blake out of the Foundation Trust," Judith said flatly. Sheila's pen paused. "He's your only child. Legacy isn't guaranteed by biology." Judith reached into her folder and slid forward 3 pages of itemized financials, her handwriting neat, margins aligned. "He doesn't see the difference between stewardship and status." Sheila scanned the summary. "This is extensive." And cross-checked. "Charlotte's not a listed beneficiary, but she's been maneuvering access." Sheila frowned. "You suspect misappropriation?" "I suspect influence first. The kind that starts with a smile and ends with a missing decimal." Judith exhaled slowly. Her hands didn't tremble, but her grip on the pen tightened. "I want a clause added to the trust immediately," she continued. "Any foundation funds used for public relations, press campaigns, or event elevation must be pre-approved by me or a future appointed fiduciary." Sheila jotted it down. "I can draft that this afternoon." Judith leaned back. "Good. Because the orchids at that gala cost more than the scholarship we awarded last quarter." Sheila raised a brow. Judith opened her phone and pulled up a PDF. Charlotte billed the foundation through her consulting firm. $12,000 for Gala floral concept, not actual flowers. Concept. The word hung there, absurd and cold. Judith added, "The florist confirmed they were bulk imported from a wholesaler. 2,000 max." Charlotte's markup was imaginative. Sheila's jaw tightened. "I assume there are more?" "I've started building a ledger, quietly." Judith's eyes didn't blink. Line by line. By the end of the hour, Sheila had called in her junior associate to begin preliminary documentation for a forensic audit. "You'll want a third-party firm," she advised. "I already contacted Langston and Fry. They specialize in nonprofit fraud." Sheila smiled without warmth. "Some people dress up for charity. You arm yourself." "I've always preferred armor over sequins," Judith replied. She stood gathering her things, the pen clipped back into place like a finishing stitch. "Judith," Sheila said as she walked her to the door, "you're not reacting. You're orchestrating." Judith paused. "Reaction is for people with less to lose." Her voice was gentle, but in her silence there was thunder. Later that night, the amber light of her kitchen cast long shadows across her notes. She sat with reading glasses balanced on her nose, a calculator beside her. Invoices spread like a puzzle no one expected her to solve. Charlotte's company name kept surfacing, Elegant Elan, sometimes spelled with 2 L's, sometimes 1. Judith flagged each inconsistency with a yellow tag. Each was a breadcrumb, and Judith knew how to follow trails better than most, especially trails paved in arrogance. At 11:42 p.m., as she was organizing duplicates, her phone buzzed. A message from Sheila. Subject, transaction flagged body, just pulled from the latest ledger, $12,000 marked Gala floral concept. Processing under Elegant Elan's EIN, sending to audit team tomorrow. More likely buried. Judith tilted the invoice under the warm desk lamp, the gold-foiled logo of Elegant Elan catching the light like a smirk. The floral total sat there, unapologetically inflated. $12,000 for a custom concept installation. She flipped the page. Charlotte's vendor was not the Gala's florist of record. It was a private boutique uptown, owned by a college friend of Charlotte's. Judith had already called. The woman stammered when asked if the flowers had ever even left her shop. They hadn't. Judith pressed her fingers together, the tips forming a steeple beneath her chin. Fraud wasn't just blooming. It had been groomed. By late afternoon, Blake had agreed to meet. Not at the house, but in the small boardroom at the Family Foundation's office. Judith chose the location intentionally. Neutral territory, but still hers. Blake arrived 10 minutes late, cologne sharp, jaw set like a child bracing for detention. "I came as a courtesy," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "I'm busy. Not busy enough to notice invoices rerouted through your wife's shell vendor." Judith pushed the documents across the table, slow and precise. He scanned them, eyes narrowing. "She's trying to elevate the foundation's profile. You've always been so quiet. Effective, Judith corrected. He scoffed. She understands modern philanthropy. Optics matter now. She's not elevating you, Judith said, folding her hands neatly. She's draining you. You just haven't realized it's your name on the pipe. The silence that followed was tight enough to snap. You always had trouble accepting change, Blake said. Judith leaned back. And you always had trouble noticing when change was counterfeit. Blake left without shaking her hand. Judith didn't watch him go. That night, she began creating a private logbook. Page 1, Expenses in Bloom. Each transaction related to Elegant Elon received a timestamp and vendor note. She highlighted duplicates, cross-checked tax filings, and kept receipts in fireproof sleeves. On Thursday, she made a silent donation to Harmony Outreach, a grassroots charity focused on local women's housing. Charlotte once called it quaint. Judith called it efficient. The executive director welcomed her by first name. "You've always kept us going," she whispered. On Saturday, Judith attended Harmony's winter gala. Alone. The ballroom was understated, white linen, warm lights, a cellist tucked into the corner playing Bach. There were no orchids, no photo booths, no signature cocktails named after zodiac signs, just genuine stories, past bread baskets, and people who looked each other in the eyes. Judith sat in the front row during the keynote. A former recipient of the housing program spoke through tears about her son's first night in a real bed. Judith's throat tightened, but she didn't cry, not publicly. Afterward, she shook the speaker's hand. "You remind me of my mother," the woman said. Judith smiled, small, controlled. That's the highest praise. As the event ended, she passed by the silent auction table and paused. A crystal vase caught her attention. Not for its beauty, but because a small placard read, "Floral Concept Donated by Elegant Elon." Her breath sharpened. It was the same vendor, same logo, same deceit. But this wasn't her fundraiser. She snapped a photo, then one more, framing the logo clearly beneath the soft lighting. Charlotte was branding herself across multiple charities without authorization, without oversight, and this one, Judith knew, had not approved her as an official sponsor. Judith didn't text Blake. She didn't call Sheila. She simply turned and walked out of the ballroom, steps soundless on velvet carpet, the photo burning a quiet hole in her phone. The audit folder snapped shut with a clean, final sound. In Sheila's office, the air was cool, heavy with eucalyptus from a sleek diffuser on the windowsill. Judith slid the folder forward across the lacquered wood desk. She used the same vendor on 3 separate invoices, each billed at triple the market rate, Judith said evenly. One for the gala, one for social styling consulting, one labeled Foundational Branding Initiative. Sheila adjusted her glasses, scanning the spreadsheet. "This isn't creative accounting, it's theft, and brazen." She called it her legacy brand. Judith's lips barely moved. Sheila raised an eyebrow. "She told a donor I overheard, said she was shaping a modern philanthropic identity with Blake's full support." "And yours?" Judith folded her hands. "Uninvited. As always." Bylaw 6.2 in the Marlowe Foundation's charter was mercilessly clear. Any proven misuse of funds, particularly those funneled through personal or undisclosed vendors, meant permanent exclusion from partnership, contract, or beneficiary status. No appeal, no second chance. Sheila lifted the top sheet of the audit, one with Charlotte's stylized signature at the bottom. "This is enough. We'll file it." "Blacklist the firm," Judith said. Her tone was soft. Her gaze wasn't. The memo went out before noon. By 5, Charlotte's company was flagged in every internal system the foundation used. That night, Blake called. She didn't answer. The next morning, he arrived unannounced at her front door, his jaw clenched, hair rumpled, wearing a quarter-zip sweater like armor. "You humiliated her," he said, stepping into the foyer without being asked. "She did that herself," Judith replied, walking slowly toward the living room. "You always hated her success." Judith turned. "What success? Misusing funds? Inflating invoices with your signature on the bottom? Blake's voice rose. You've never accepted that I built something too. That Charlotte, she's helped us evolve. Into what? Judith asked. A parody of wealth? Silence. Then Blake's voice dropped into a hiss. This is jealousy. Judith studied him. No, Blake. It's accounting. He stormed out. She didn't follow. That evening, she updated her estate directives. Under the new Behavioral Integrity Clause, any beneficiary who showed sustained patterns of disrespect, public or private, could be removed from the will entirely, regardless of bloodline. Sheila added it to the file under the codename Clause 14B. Judith then began transferring critical assets, artwork, securities, board proxy rights, to a private LLC she had named quietly the week prior. Halcyon Reserve. It bore no public trace of the Marlowe name. Sheila approved each move with clinical precision. You're building a firewall. I'm building silence, Judith replied. She paused at the door. One more thing. Yes? Add a clause for press retaliation. If Charlotte, or anyone, attempts to defame me after these changes, their entire eligibility dissolves. Retroactively. You want a future-facing trigger clause? Exactly. 2 days passed. Then it began. The first post appeared on a blog titled True Legacy Unmasked. It was unsigned, anonymous, just a whisper across the web. But Judy, its niece, who handled crisis PR for a celebrity skincare brand, flagged it within hours. She's using coded language, calling someone a passive donor matriarch who refused to evolve. It's her voice. I'd bet my bonus. The blog's banner image was a close-up of vintage pearls, eerily similar to Judith's portrait on the foundation site. Another post accused unnamed older board members of clinging to power with outmoded grace. Judith read the lines twice, then once more. She's not just retaliating, Sheila said, reading over her shoulder. She's building a whisper campaign. Judith closed the laptop without flinching. She'll regret choosing prose over silence. The third blog post had just gone live when Judith's niece, Erica, leaned across the dining table with her laptop open and a smirk twitching at the edge of her lips. She's using a VPN, but not well. The IP address pings back to a co-working space 2 floors below her firm's office. The timestamps match when her car badge logs into the parking structure. Judith didn't blink. She reached for her Earl Grey, the porcelain clink sharp in the quiet of her kitchen. Confirm it. Screenshot everything. I already did, and wait for it, her assistant posted a behind-the-scenes selfie from the same building, time-stamped, same day. One of the captions, fixing grammar for a ghost. Judith took a sip and nodded. Save that too. Erica zipped it all into a folder and labeled it Legacy Gate. By noon, Sheila had everything. This isn't just petty, Judith, it's defamatory. Your silence has been protection, not weakness. Judith stared out the office window, where late spring sunlight hit the glass in clean, pale streaks. It's time to revoke her shield. A cease and desist was drafted and sent, hand-delivered by a private courier, no fanfare. Charlotte would open it in her corner office with manicured fingers and an iced matcha trembling slightly in her hand. The envelope was thin. The warning was not. Within 24 hours, the blogs vanished. But Judith knew better than to believe silence meant surrender. She called Sheila the next morning with a new instruction. Remove her name from all executor rights. If Blake predeceases me, or refuses to act, she is not to be consulted under any circumstance. Done. Judith walked into her closet that afternoon and opened a small cedar box in the corner. Inside were Gala programs from 15 years of events. Some yellowed, some embossed in silver. All bearing the Marlowe Foundation's name. Not anymore. The venue she selected for her new gala had once been dismissed by Charlotte as too country club chic. Judith reserved it for a Saturday evening in May. 1 week before Charlotte's next scheduled event, she hired a new florist, new caterer, no family, and then she sent an invitation, not to Blake, not to Charlotte, to Emma Hart, Charlotte's ex-assistant. The invite was printed in thick cardstock, the envelope hand-addressed in calligraphy. It read, Ms. Hart, You are cordially invited as a VIP guest to the Endurance Gala, hosted by Judith Marlowe. Your presence is requested for a toast in gratitude. A single handwritten note accompanied it. Your grace in transition did not go unnoticed. 2 days later, Judith's phone lit up. It was Emma. Judith answered on the second ring. Ms. Hart. Emma's voice was low but urgent. I wanted to thank you for the invitation. It means more than you know. You deserved better than you were given. Emma hesitated. You're going to want to hear what she said about you last week. Judith leaned back in her chair, a slow inhale filling her lungs. She told a new intern at the firm, Emma continued, that if she ever turned into a Judith, to retire early and spare everyone. Then she said, some women confuse dignity with delusion. One wears pearls, the other throws punches too late. Silence. Judith smiled, her voice ice-wrapped velvet. Send me a time and place. I already have it recorded. Judith stood beneath the vaulted ballroom ceiling, arms folded, eyes scanning every inch of the space. The chandeliers glittered like intention, catching just enough light to throw stars on the marble floors. It wasn't a venue that whispered luxury. It declared it, softly, like someone confident in their inheritance. Her silver flats made no sound as she crossed the floor to the tasting table. The pastry chef stood at attention, nervously adjusting his cuffs. Try the lemon tart again, Judith said, voice even. It was oversweet last week. I want something that finishes clean. He nodded, retreating to the back. Erica, her niece, approached with a gleaming iPad, her expression sharp. We just got confirmed RSVPs from 5 Fortune 500 women. One of them wrote in her note, "You helped me get my first board seat, I never forgot." Judith barely reacted, just reached for a gold pen and marked a correction on the seating chart. Put her at table 1. I want her next to the state senator. She said, Charlotte tried to pitch her on a brand collab last year. Got rejected. Judith didn't blink. So she'll enjoy dessert even more. Behind them, stagehands adjusted the lighting as requested, muted gold along the stage's edge, soft violet washes on the room's perimeter. Judith had asked for warmth, not drama. I want elegance, not envy, she had told them. The envy comes from who's not on the guest list. Erica swiped to another tab on her iPad. We secured full press coverage under the original Marlowe Foundation name. No mention of Blake, none of Charlotte. Judith nodded. Let the past arrive in silence. 2 days earlier, she had quietly purchased all available domains related to Charlotte's personal branding firm, Elevate Society, Elevate Women, Elevate Elegance, each now redirected to an anonymous microsite titled The Velvet Filter. It featured a soft pink and ivory color scheme and a series of calm, neutral-toned exposés on the misuse of image-based philanthropy. The first article, published under the pseudonym J. Marin, bore the headline, Elegance Shouldn't Exploit, When Fashion Meets Falsity in Philanthropy. It had been shared 27 times in the first hour. But tonight, it was rehearsal. And Judith had left nothing to chance. She walked to the mirrored dressing room adjacent to the main ballroom. There, Emma, the assistant Charlotte once barked orders at over misfolded napkins, stood in a sleek black pantsuit reviewing the run of show. You'll be our lead host? Judith asked, adjusting her bracelet. Emma smiled, but there was something steel in it now. You trust me with the mic? I trust you with the story. Emma nodded once. Let's tell it quietly. Outside, a black town car pulled up. Judith peeked from the window and watched as a woman in navy exited, Lillian Grant, the board member Charlotte had once interrupted during a fundraising proposal and never invited again. Judith opened the door for her personally. Ms. Grant. Judith, Lillian said, lips twitching. I like what you're doing here. I'm not doing anything, Judith replied coolly. Just showing what was always there. The mood of the rehearsal was crisp, focused, like a first orchestra tune-up before an opera where everyone already knew who the diva had been and who she no longer was. That evening, over tea, Erica handed her the final checklists. All pieces locked. Press, vendors, RSVPs. We even secured a back page feature in the Society supplement. Judith allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Then her phone buzzed. A new email. From Sheila. Subject: copyright complaint filed. She opened it. Charlotte had filed a legal copyright notice, claiming brand interference by a small LLC Judith had founded in silence 3 years earlier under her mother's maiden name. Judith tapped the screen. The LLC listed Judith as sole owner. The envelope was unassuming, off-white, corner-creased, with Charlotte's attorney's firm stamped in minimalist navy ink. Judith slid it across the table toward Sheila with a single finger, as if the paper might stain. Copyright complaint, filed by a woman using someone else's money to build her empire, Judith said, her voice flat but flint-edged. Sheila unfolded the document. Her eyes scanned fast. She's accusing Elevate Legacy Holdings of infringing on the Elevate Society brand? Judith nodded. Which I legally registered in 2021, under my LLC, the name she mocked for sounding too retro. Sheila's smile was quiet, surgical, poetic. She handed you her vanity on a legal platter. It took 2 days to file the counterclaim. Along with it, Sheila submitted billing records, archived emails, and photo evidence, each time-stamped to prove that Charlotte had used the foundation's vendors, event resources, and even Judith's personal assistant, without approval, to develop Elevate Society's launch campaign. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, but fallout doesn't wait for gavels. By week's end, Judith began receiving forwarded emails from vendors. One by one, they were backing out of contracts with Charlotte's firm. "Apologies," one florist wrote, "we're reevaluating our portfolio partnerships." Another simply said, "After reviewing the documents sent by Elevate Legacy Holdings, we're terminating our agreement effective immediately." Judith never gloated. She archived each one, neat as pins in a doll's heart. Blake showed up unannounced one night, rain dripping from his coat sleeves. He looked thinner than usual, shadows under his eyes, but still spoke with the agitated defiance of a man who'd backed the wrong horse and still hadn't accepted the bet. "You're killing her reputation," he snapped, stepping into the foyer without waiting to be invited. Judith stood still in her cardigan, holding a cup of mint tea. "She's not being killed, Blake. She's being documented. She made mistakes, okay? But so do you. You're being cruel." Judith set the tea down without a sound. "You don't recognize the difference between cruelty and clarity." "I do," Blake's jaw clenched. "You're doing this to punish me." "No, Blake," she said softly. "I'm doing this to protect what I built before she turned it into glitter and invoices." He stared at her, chest heaving. She could see him calculating the cost of siding with someone who only ever saw him as useful until the money dried. "I'm begging you to stop," he said, voice cracking. Judith looked him in the eye. "It hasn't even started." That night, she updated her living trust. Sheila watched as she signed a new clause in black ink. "No future claim shall be considered valid if made in response to public embarrassment." Then she flipped to the final page and added one more line under the witness section. "Public embarrassment immunity activated upon betrayal." By the time dawn broke, Charlotte had lost 3 more vendor relationships. Judith's phone buzzed with a quiet chime. Erica had sent a photo from the ballroom. The centerpieces were set, the lighting had been tested again, and the guest programs had just arrived, embossed with Judith's name across the top in soft gold script. She stared at it for a long moment, then rose from her desk. In the dressing room, she zipped up the crimson dress she'd had custom-fitted weeks ago. The fabric shimmered with restraint, like something that didn't need to beg for attention but still owned the air around it. Her silver heels clicked once across the hardwood. She picked up the clutch. Inside it, her RSVP, her keynote cards, and one folded slip of paper, Charlotte's copyright complaint. As she stepped into the waiting town car, the driver opened the door with a small bow. "Marlowe Foundation Gala?" he asked. Judith gave the faintest smile. "That's the one." The car door shut behind her as she adjusted her hem. The gala had begun. Judith would walk in alone, red dress, silver heels, and every eye waiting. The moment Judith stepped into the ballroom, conversations didn't stop. But they bent. Heads turned subtly, forks paused midair, phones discreetly angled for candid shots. She moved with quiet command, crimson silk gliding over parquet flooring, silver heels reflecting flashes of chandelier light. A volunteer usher led her past the front tables toward a velvet-accented seat marked with a calligraphed name card, Mrs. Judith Marlowe, founding patron. Center stage view, no family, no distractions, just legacy. She sat, spine straight, breath even, her hands smoothed over the linen napkin. No trembling, not tonight. The program began at 7 sharp. Judith's name was announced after the keynote. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd as she stood. No fanfare, no spotlight shift, just the sound of heels across oak and the hum of curiosity building behind champagne flutes. At the podium, she adjusted the mic once. Her voice didn't boom. It threaded through the room like warm string through cold fabric. "We live in a time when visibility often outshouts value," she began. "Tonight, I'd like to recenter the quiet women. The women who endure, who fund dreams, who stand in corners until they choose not to." Silence hung like silk. She continued. "My mother waited tables for 32 years. She paid for books she never read and opportunities she never had. This scholarship bears her name, not because she was loud, but because she lasted." A standing ovation followed, not rushed, not theatrical, earned. A photographer snapped a shot of her wiping the corner of one eye. The image would hit local press the next morning with the headline, "Dignity in Red, a gala that remembered the right names." But across town the story was different. Charlotte's event, titled Legacy Rising, opened to a half-capacity room and a confused sound crew. Donors had shifted without explanation. Her event consultant canceled an hour prior. Catering delivered the wrong menu. Photos emerged online before the night was over. One in particular, Charlotte standing by an unlit floral arch, smiling stiffly while waitstaff cleared untouched risotto, circulated with the caption, "When branding outpaces integrity." Judith didn't see the post firsthand, but she did feel her phone buzz as she left the gala, coat draped over her arm. One message. No name, just the number. She saw the pictures. "You looked magnificent, thank you." See. It was Charlotte's former assistant. Judith didn't respond, just read it twice, then archived it like one of her trust documents. Important, but finished. Back home, she changed into soft cotton pajamas and let her hair down. The moonlight caught in the kitchen window as she poured a small glass of Pinot Noir. She stood there a moment, alone, but not lonely. That night, the foundation website spiked with new donors. The Women's Endurance Scholarship page received over 100 applications within 24 hours. At exactly 8:07 the next morning, a car pulled into her driveway. She saw the outline through the window before the knock came. Blake. No umbrella, no coat, just blazer, loose tie, and that familiar tension etched deep into his jaw. Judith opened the door, expression unreadable. Blake didn't wait for an invitation. What the hell was that? She stepped aside just far enough to let him storm in. The door closed behind him harder than necessary, judging by the way the glass panels shivered in their frames. Blake stood in Judith's living room, drenched in stale cologne and bruised ego. "You couldn't have just talked to me?" His tone was half wounded, half accusatory. Judith didn't rise from her armchair. She looked at him like a man who had once belonged in her future, and now only existed in her archive. "I did talk," she said. "You just edited me out." Blake stepped closer, jaw tight. "You made a spectacle. You embarrassed Charlotte. Me. You weaponized legacy, our legacy." Judith tilted her head, the faintest smile touching the corner of her mouth. "That wasn't our legacy, Blake. That was mine. You loaned it out to someone who treated it like mood lighting." He moved to respond, but she raised a hand, then reached down to the lacquered drawer beside her chair and pulled out a slim black folio. No dramatics, just precision. "This is the most recent revision of my living trust," she said, offering it to him like a guest check at a bad restaurant. "You'll notice your name is still there, technically." He opened it with hesitation. His fingers halted halfway through the page. A quiet Jesus slipped out before he could stop it. His name wasn't removed, but it was grayed out, annotated, marked non-controlling interest, pending behavioral clause compliance, legal code for you're in name only, and just barely. He looked up. You're disowning me. I'm redefining ownership, she said calmly. You and Charlotte spent a year laundering influence through my foundation. Now you want grace on demand. This isn't a drive-through. Blake laughed bitterly. You think you're clever, but this is petty. Judith stood, smoothed her sleeves. Would you like coffee? He stared at her like she was speaking a different language. You're offering me coffee now? She didn't break stride. You've never understood the difference between anger and consequence. This is the latter. I'll regret this? She asked. Possibly, but I'm already out of patience, and you're out of credit. Blake didn't answer. He turned, spine stiff, and walked out without another word. Judith watched him go without blinking. As soon as the door clicked shut, she turned to her laptop. One click opened her secure estate dashboard. Another sent the file to Sheila with a brief message, Phase 2, implement all locks, no override. Then she opened a second browser tab and entered the portal for Midland Lux Rentals, the staging company Charlotte still owed for her failed gala. A discreet purchase agreement popped up, courtesy of her earlier inquiry. Judith signed. One acquisition later, she owned the inventory Charlotte had tried to secure for her next event. The venue? That required a bit more finesse, but not much. Charlotte had placed a deposit on the Rosemere Conservatory for a future fundraiser. Her balance was still unpaid. Judith made a private call to the venue's board, quietly offered to cover the full remaining fee with one stipulation. I'll honor the calendar date, she said, but I'd like the room for a donor tea instead. The board agreed. In less than 24 hours, Charlotte's next Elevate Society gala was erased from the books and replaced by Judith's quiet elegance. Sheila's name lit up her screen a few minutes later. Text from Sheila. Court ruling came in. Charlotte's copyright is void. Foundation misappropriation confirmed. Her brand is legally unprotected. Judith let out a slow breath. No gloating, just clarity. She opened her schedule and blocked off the weekend, not for rest, but for what came next. The ruling landed like glass shattering inside a marble hall, loud, final, irreparable. Judith read it on her porch, a ceramic mug of Earl Grey cradled between her palms. The court seal glowed at the top of the page. The verdict below was crisp and clean. All claims to proprietary branding under Elevate Society are null and void due to fraudulent asset sourcing. Translation: Charlotte's empire, built on borrowed clout and misappropriated dollars, was dust. Judith sipped her tea. It tasted faintly of bergamot and justice. The fallout came faster than expected. By noon, Charlotte's inbox was flooded. Event planners demanding deposits back, vendors sending curt emails with subject lines like, invoice unpaid, final notice. Even her signature pink boxes, once the hallmark of her gala glow kits, were being auctioned off by a wholesaler who'd gone 6 months unpaid. Judith didn't smile, but she did watch. Meanwhile, Blake's credit score took the first hit, then the second. By the end of the week, their joint account had 3 flags and a suspended line. From the lifestyle bank they once bragged about, Judith knew because Sheila had quietly filed a UCC 1 lien 6 days prior. Charlotte's attempts to shift liabilities failed. The foundation was no longer a shield. Still, Judith said nothing. She preferred her truths whispered through consequence. Instead, she opened her laptop and sent a $4,000 anonymous donation to The Civic Record, a mid-tier journalism platform known for exposing influencer grift. Along with the transfer, she included a tip, an untraceable packet of press clippings, photos, and the court's ruling. 3 days later, the article dropped. When philanthropy becomes performance, the collapse of Insta integrity. No names were printed directly. But buried in paragraph 9, the line cut clean. One source, who attended both galas, described a particular host as the woman who once mocked a major donor, until that donor answered in capital letters. The article spread across the mid-Atlantic nonprofit circuit like wildfire. Board members forwarded it with subject lines like, "Know who you're hiring." A few foundation blogs reposted it with emojis. And then, the phone calls. Charlotte's assistant, ex-assistant, now freelancing, sent Judith a screenshot of a group chat. Friend 1? OMG, did she really say that about a donor? Friend 2? Apparently, classless. Friend 3? Karma is real. Then came the voicemail, a woman sobbing softly between breaths. Charlotte, it's Jenna. I can't be affiliated anymore. They said your name came up, that you were the one who insulted a legacy donor at her own table. I defended you. But were you? Click. Judith didn't save the voicemail. She didn't need to. The next morning, Charlotte deleted her Instagram, her Pinterest mood boards, and the Facebook page for Elevate Society. Gone in a digital blink. By afternoon, her website displayed only an error, 404. Page not found. Judith stared at it, arms crossed. The same page that once hosted Charlotte's vision statement and press photos now showed nothing but white space. She didn't screenshot it. No trophies were needed. That night, under soft lamplight, she updated the donor list for the Women's Endurance Scholarship, removed Blake's name as honorary co-founder, replaced it with 3 new names, one anonymous, one hers, and one that simply read, "In honor of Grace, kept quiet." She was about to close her laptop when her inbox pinged. New message, subject, application, follow-up. The preview was short. Dear Judith, I understand your foundation is planning a luncheon next quarter. I've recently applied for a role through Prestige Catering. I'll be assigned to that event. I just wanted to say, I'll be professional. Charlotte Judith stared at the screen. A second passed, then a third. She clicked once to open it fully, read it again, then once more. No punctuation errors, no pleading, no apology. Just a quiet admission. She would be serving the tables now. Judith clicked reply, then paused. Instead, she forwarded the email to Sheila with a note. Add this to the archive. Label it, Table Turned. 2 days later, Judith went to attend a private event. The champagne flute trembled slightly on the silver tray. Judith saw it before Charlotte did, just the faintest shimmer in the glass, the softest clink against crystal as nerves betrayed a practiced hand. Charlotte stood near the far end of the room, half shadowed by the soft uplighting of the terrace arch. She wore black, sleeveless uniform top, pressed pants, and an apron knotted tightly at her waist. Her hair, once perfectly waved for magazine photo spreads, was pinned back in a low bun that said nothing except, "Shift starts at 6." Judith walked in wearing slate silk and confidence. Her nameplate, etched in glass beside the seating card, read, Donor Host, Judith Ayers. The private event was for the Legacy Educators Initiative, a program Judith had discreetly supported for years. Tonight's affair was intimate. No photographers, no red carpets, no influencer name tags, just educators, benefactors, and a string quartet playing something that didn't need to be recognized to be appreciated. She didn't look for Charlotte, didn't need to. The shift in air said enough. A tray approached. Sparkling water? Charlotte's voice was even, low, almost too quiet. Her eyes never quite made contact. Judith accepted the glass without pause, her hand steady, her eyes cool. "Thank you," she said, then, without blinking, slid a folded $100 bill onto the tray. Presentation matters. Charlotte's lips pressed together, her knuckles tightened beneath the tray's weight. A flash of red traveled up her neck like an infection of embarrassment. She nodded once, mechanical, then turned on her heel. Judith didn't watch her go. She turned instead toward the open-air garden where guests mingled beneath string lights and copper lanterns, their conversation humming like a satisfied hive. The scent of rosemary from the past appetizers clung gently to the breeze. She joined a small circle of retired professors, spoke softly about curriculum grants and mentorship legacies, laughed lightly when one guest said, "I can't believe no one thought to bring Charlotte on board for this." Judith only sipped her drink. Later, when dessert trays arrived, lemon tartlets and espresso mousse, Judith leaned toward the event coordinator and said quietly, "Lovely service tonight. Efficient." That night, when she returned home, she didn't take off her shoes right away. She walked through her entryway, framed photos of her late husband, the antique mirror Charlotte once called outdated, and sat down at her desk, logged into the donor portal, left a review. Service, adequate. Memory, priceless. The contrast between humility and performance was the finest thing served all evening. She hit submit. By morning, the review had quietly circulated among the hosting committee. A few text threads lit up. "Did you see Judith's comment? Who was the server she meant? Wait, wasn't that?" Whispers did what headlines couldn't. At 9:13 a.m., Judith's phone rang. Blake. She didn't answer the first time, or the second. But the third time, she let it connect. His voice cracked on the first word. "She's suing me." Judith stayed quiet. He continued, fast now. "She claims the LLC was jointly influenced, that I encouraged her to build Elevate Society with family funding, says I let her take the fall." Judith closed her eyes, leaned back in her chair. "She's got nothing, Mom. I mean it. But her lawyer's pushing for mediation. They think I'll settle just to make it stop." Judith opened her eyes slowly. "And will you?" A pause. Then a ragged, helpless breath. "I don't know what to do." She waited 2 beats. "Neither did I," she said calmly, when she laughed across 3 chairs and called me a waitress. Silence flooded the line. Judith didn't fill it. The knock came at 7:02 a.m. Not a text, not a call. A knock. Firm, uncertain. Judith didn't move right away. She just poured her first coffee, the scent of cinnamon from her creamer still unfurling across the kitchen like a silent comfort. She opened the door slowly, cradling her mug in both hands. There he was. Blake, her only son, standing like a ghost with yesterday's jacket wrinkled and his tie undone, no trace of the carefully managed man Charlotte had molded. "Can I come in?" he asked, eyes low. Judith stepped aside but said nothing. In the living room, he sat down heavily on the same couch where he'd once insisted Charlotte was visionary. He looked older than 40 now, paler. The air around him carried the scent of desperation, cologne masking fatigue, breath sharp with leftover whiskey. He didn't ask about her health or her day. He launched in. "She's bleeding me dry," he said. "The lawyer fees, the private arbitration. She's saying I enabled fraud." Judith said nothing, only stirred her coffee with the slow clink of silver against ceramic. "I need help," he said. "Just enough to get through the next few months. Liquid cash. Or a short-term trust release. Something?" Judith set her mug down gently, the coaster absorbing the sound. "I believe," she said calmly, "we both remember a time when my presence was considered excessive." Blake's jaw tensed. "I was trying to keep peace. You took it as betrayal." "No," Judith said, voice even. "I took it as clarity." She rose, crossed the room and returned with a single manila envelope. Inside, 1 typed page, signed and notarized. "What's this?" he asked. "Your invitation back in?" she said. "But not to my wallet, to my trust." He blinked. She continued. "Apology. Restitution. Boundaries." She tapped the page. "Those are the terms. You'll sign nothing until all 3 are complete. There is no shortcut through blood." He read the page in silence. "So you want me to, what, repent?" "No," she said. "I want you to recognize that respect doesn't retroactively deposit itself." He stood. "This is punishment." "No," she corrected. "This is structure. Something your marriage lacked." He shoved the envelope back onto the coffee table. "This isn't you. You used to—" "I used to believe in unconditional generosity," she interrupted. "But even legacies have receipts." He hesitated, then turned and left, door closing harder than it needed to. Judith didn't flinch. That afternoon, she logged into the foundation's back end. Charlotte's profile was the last vestige. Her photo still smiled beside a defunct mission statement. Judith deleted the image, rewrote the biography from scratch. The new homepage now bore 1 quiet phrase beneath her signature: founded on dignity, funded with discernment. She clicked Publish. Next, she opened the file folder labeled Articles Pending Release. It was time. The essay she'd been crafting for months, her story, told plainly, with names and roles altered, was uploaded under her real name. Title: When Appearances Mock the Hands That Fund Them. Byline: Judith Ayers. Benefactor: Former Chair, Mother. She emailed it to Sheila with the subject, Legacy Phase Finalized. Then she returned to the kitchen, poured the last of her coffee, and opened the back patio doors. The air was sharp with autumn's shift, crisp, edged with wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney. She was halfway through reading a note from her event host when the doorbell rang again. This time, no knock. She opened the front door to find a cream-colored envelope, thick with weight and slightly smudged at the edges. No return address, handwritten. The penmanship was familiar, looped and calculated. She slit the envelope open with a brass letter opener. The letter was smooth in her hand, thick stationery that still carried the faintest trace of perfume, orange blossom, muted and strained beneath ink and gilt. Judith sat by the fireplace, no music playing, no wine in hand, just silence and the soft crackle of burning cedar as she read Charlotte's handwriting under a single lamp. Judith, I don't know where to begin, which is probably why I waited this long. Maybe you've already filed this under too late. And maybe you're right. But I've been thinking a lot about that night. The gala. The one where I whispered something so careless, so unnecessary, so sharp it sliced right through our chances at being family. I was cruel. Not because I meant to be, but because I didn't bother not to be. That's worse, I think. You didn't deserve that comment. The waitress thing. God, I hate even writing it. I see now what you've built, what you protected. I mocked it because I couldn't replicate it. I wanted your legacy but not your discipline. I tried to wear elegance like a borrowed dress and it didn't fit. I know the lawsuits are over. I won't pursue anything. I've told Blake to stop too. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. You don't have to respond. I'd understand if you didn't. But I'm trying to be better. Charlotte Judith didn't sigh. She didn't scoff. Her face remained still, carved in the soft amber glow like something preserved, sacred. She folded the letter once, sharply, creasing it with practiced precision, walked to her filing cabinet, pulled the drawer labeled Personal, and inside it, one slim manila folder, post-war relics. She placed the letter between an old foundation agenda and a faded photo of the original board, the one Charlotte had once called dated, slid the folder shut without a sound. Closure, she'd learned, didn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it came folded. That evening, she called Marla, the event coordinator she'd worked with on the gala. Are you still doing March bookings? She asked, tone even but purposeful. For you? Always, Marla replied. What's the occasion? Mentorship, not revenge. Marla chuckled. Theme? Judith paused, then said, Humility has better lighting. The words made her smile, genuinely, for the first time that week. She hung up and opened her laptop, created a new document titled Mentorship Gala, Keynote Draft. At the top, she wrote one line. Dignity doesn't need a spotlight, but it survives under one. She spent the next hour drafting bullet points. What to say, what not to say, whose silence to protect, whose apologies to accept without return. The wind outside picked up. Leaves scuttled across the porch like reluctant guests. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She nearly declined, then answered. Judith Ayers? Yes. My name is Erin Kessler. I'm the new director of the Lyndon Wallace Foundation. We focus on intergenerational philanthropy and board diversity. I just read your article in Civic Voice. The way you articulated legacy without ego, it landed. Judith said nothing, but her lips curved upward. I know it's last minute, Erin continued, but we were wondering if you'd consider mentoring our board. Just a seasonal role, speaking, light consulting. You'd have full discretion. Judith leaned back in her chair, eyes flicking toward the silver frame on her mantel, her late husband in his gala tux, smiling beside her in a moment when legacy had nothing to do with press or branding. She imagined Charlotte reading the article, seeing her name nowhere and yet somehow still feeling every line. "I'll need to see the charter," Judith said calmly. "Of course. Sending it now. Include the list of current board members." "Absolutely." She hung up. Let the quiet settle in again. Outside, the wind softened. Inside, Judith opened a new calendar entry. March 9th. Lighting check. Then she changed the folder label on her desktop from Defense Strategy to Legacy Strategy. The room smelled of fresh ink and espresso. Newness hung in the air like potential. Judith stood behind a lucite podium, her silver pin catching a glint of the overhead track lights. Rows of young professionals, foundation fellows, and board apprentices leaned forward like plants toward light. The Lyndon Wallace Foundation had filled every seat. Judith's name on the program had doubled their RSVP count. She cleared her throat, once, not to silence the room, but to ground herself. "I was mistaken for many things," she began, her voice steady, unfussy. "A relic, a donor, a waitress." A ripple of surprise moved across the crowd. A few glanced up from their notes. "I was none of those, and all of them. The real truth is, respect isn't inherited, it's observed." Phones went down, pens went up. She offered no slideshow, just a list. 1. Watch who whispers when they think power can't hear. 2. Don't confuse access with authenticity. 3. If they exclude you from their guest list, build your own table. Invite people who clap with their eyes, not just their hands. A soft laugh rippled through the room. Someone in the back whispered, "Damn." Judith smiled, barely. "I never wore revenge as perfume, but I let it scent the air when needed." She paused, eyes grazing the young faces, some in suits too large, others in ambition too tight. "The fall will come, from grace, from illusion. Let it. What rises afterward is yours." A silence settled, not heavy, but sacred. Then someone began clapping. Slowly at first, then all at once. Judith didn't bow. She nodded once, eyes calm, shoulders squared. This wasn't performance. This was placement. As the applause washed over her, a woman in the second row whispered to her neighbor, "She's the real deal." Judith heard it. She turned slightly, just enough to be heard as she passed the mic to the next speaker. "I've been real the whole time." She exited stage left, her heels tapping cleanly on the wood, sharp, assured. Outside the glass-paneled exit, flashbulbs popped like distant fireworks. A journalist leaned in. "Judith, any advice for today's generation of philanthropists?" "Audit more than your balance sheet," she replied, lips forming a razor-line smile. "Audit your guest list." Laughter. Cameras. Not once did she flinch. Back home, she placed her event badge into the keepsake drawer, right next to her late husband's cufflink box. "You'd have liked that room," she said aloud, not expecting an answer. Just truth echoing in familiar walls. The mail was stacked neatly on the console. One envelope stood out, gilded trim, no return address. She slid it open carefully. Inside were 5 Gala invitations, each thick with curated exclusivity, names she recognized, 2 she didn't. She didn't read them all, just the one on top, black and cream cardstock. Hargrave Institute's Centennial Evening of Influence. The venue? The same place where Charlotte once sneered, "It's a little pedestrian." Judith smiled, picked up her Mont Blanc pen, circled one RSVP card, then tore the rest in half. Clean, deliberate. She pressed the single response card flat against the marble counter, picked up her phone, texted Marla. "Confirmed, Hargrave, March. I'll need the silver heels again." The phone buzzed back in seconds. "Already in wardrobe. And Judith? This time you open the evening." The click of Judith's silver heels echoed softly through the marble atrium, measured, unhurried, unmistakably present. They were the same pair she'd worn that night months ago, the night Charlotte whispered her insult like a poisoned garnish. Back then, no one looked twice. Now, heads turned before she reached the check-in table. "Name?" asked the young woman at registration, already half smiling in recognition. Judith didn't need to speak. A host leaned in behind her, whispering, That's Judith Halberd, founder. Board legacy. Oh, the young woman blinked, flushing. Right this way, Ms. Halberd. Crystal chandeliers overhead glistened with intention. Velvet linens, cascading florals, and curated ambient jazz filled the space with gentle grandeur. Judith took it in like a seasoned critic, elegance without ego, warmth without pretense. She found her seat near the front, her name etched in delicate cursive on a bone-white card. She didn't eat the amuse-bouche. She never cared for beet foam or culinary theatrics, but she smiled politely, sipped once from her water glass, and folded her napkin just so. Across the room, a group of young women watched her, whispering in quick pulses. Eventually, one approached, nervous, earnest. Ms. Halberd? Her voice barely rose above the music. I just wanted to say, your keynote last month changed how I speak in board meetings. Judith tilted her head. Good, speak like the funding depends on it, because it usually does. The woman laughed, relieved. Do you mentor? Judith nodded, almost imperceptibly. I sponsor. Quietly, but keep showing up and I notice. Others gathered, a pair from a women in tech nonprofit, a solo founder with ink stains on her sleeve. They didn't ask for money, they asked for clarity. What matters most? One whispered. Judith answered without pause. Memory. Not theirs. Yours. Cameras clicked from afar. None of it fazed her now. Attention had become air, present, irrelevant. She declined the lamb entree, offered her salad plate to the shy guest beside. Her. At dessert call, Judith stood. She wouldn't stay for the finale. That was never her scene. She passed through the candlelit exit hall, the scent of orange blossom and champagne clinging faintly to the air. A woman at the coat check smiled with wide eyes. Those heels, she said breathlessly. I saw them in last month's coverage. Judith offered a dry smirk. They hold up. Outside, her driver opened the door, engine purring like a well-kept secret. Judith glanced once at the velvet ropes behind her, then settled into the leather seat. She didn't look back. As the car pulled away, the city flickered by in glittering lines, and Judith rested her head against the window. Her reflection looked older, yes, but luminous with something deeper than vindication. Resolution. A text buzzed on her phone. Hargrave board. Thank you again for everything tonight. Would you consider co-chairing next season's series? She didn't respond. Not yet. She let the invitation hang there like a favor waiting to be earned. From her purse, she pulled out a card, unlabeled, linen-textured. On it, in her own sharp handwriting, were 5 words. They served cruelty. I served legacy. She tucked the card into the inside flap of her coat. A quiet trophy. At home, she stepped out of the heels and placed them gently back in their box, next to the framed foundation bylaws Charlotte once ignored, now revised in her own ink. As she moved through the quiet warmth of her home, wind brushing the curtains like applause fading into silence, Judith turned off the hall light. She didn't need to see more. She had already seen enough.